Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Identity Factor Podcast. My name is Robin Kiesler, and I will be your host. Let's go. This month, we're going to be doing something very special, and we're going to be talking with some of the most heart-centered, mission-driven leaders and entrepreneurs that I know. Each one of them have their own powerful story and mission for change and impact in the world. As we get ready to dive in to this podcast series, we're going to be talking about leadership and business. We're going to be talking about success and identity, all as it relates to this conversation around the mental and emotional health challenges that each and every one of us humans inevitably are going to face on our journey. And we're going to be talking about some of those shadow sides of our humanity that all too often get ignored or hidden away from public view, especially for those of us that are stepping into leadership roles, especially for those of us that feel as though we've been called to be an example to our family, to our communities, in our businesses. And so oftentimes as leaders, there can be a pressure to have to perform, to have everything right. There can be a certain kind of pressure to hide away those parts of ourselves that we'd rather not share. And that's such a heartbreaking thing to see because it's within those shadow sides of ourselves that our greatest power and impact truly lies. And so that's what this Shadow Side Leadership series is all about. And that's what we're going to dive into today. Today, we're going to be talking with Tommy Geary. He is a phenomenal coach for men. He is the host of the Durable Dad podcast that provides men with the skills and tools they need to be rock solid for their work, their communities, and their families. And I'm going to give you a moment to introduce yourself as well and welcome into the podcast. So glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, very cool to hop on and see you, Robin, and talk to you. It's the work that you're doing is awesome. I kind of already said this before we hopped on, but the behind the scenes of what you're doing to bring this all together is really cool. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. I'll quickly tell my story, but I think with like what we're going to talk about, my story or our stories usually come out along the way. But yeah, my name's Tommy, everybody. Hello. I am a husband. I'm a dad. I have a 5-year-old daughter who's amazing. My wife and I run our business together, and yeah, I coach men. So this day-to-day life that I have is really new to me in like the last 3 years. We just kind of started this business 3 years ago, and I guess my story from where I was to where I am now was pretty much all paved on a lot of small steps. Like you said in my little bio that I sent you, I was a college football player, I was a snowboarder, and over a decade, a little bit more, I just kind of turned into this like mindful path, maybe intentional living. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. Try to live an intentional life. Try to spend my time in a way that isn't like leisure and just chilling all the time, working hard, but on things that matter to me. And I know that's very general, but I feel like that's where I'm at right now. And that's what I try to continue to do is like this work with guys. And what we're going to be talking about today, mental health, is just something that lights me up, gets me excited, and it's not easy, but I'm here and I'm doing it. And yeah, it's a little bit about me.
That's amazing. I love it. Well, we're so glad that you're here. This is such important work. I love that idea of like what you're talking about. Like, I think it's interesting to me because, it seems like, I don't know, snowboarding and doing meditation and yoga all around the world. I mean, it sounds like kind of like the dream, right? And it's like interesting to consider like that idea of I have to relax on this beach one more day. Like, is that sort of something that you felt yourself noticing, like wanting more meaning in your life?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was working at a corporate job, which was actually my dream job for a lot of years. And it was in the ski industry. It was a cool job. And then, after being there for 15 years, I just, I told my wife one day, I was like, I feel like I'm wasting my days away. And she like stopped me and she was like, that's a pretty bold statement. And that was kind of a pattern over the last couple of years. And it really was like everything was good about my job, And there was this like lack of purpose, this lack of, I wanted to help more. And I think I was helping in certain ways. I'm trying to think of an example here. So what was happening was I was in this job and I was like pumped and loving it when I was young, and I was all in, and I was getting promoted, and I was leading workshops within my team. And then I wasn't looking for promotions anymore. Like I saw the work that other people were doing outside of me, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And instead of taking some action on that, I just kind of sat back for a while and I started putting on some pounds. I wasn't getting outside as much as I wanted to. And I think that all culminated into that conversation with my wife when I was like, I feel like I'm wasting my days away. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not just going to like, I don't know. That was kind of a turning point for me
Yeah.
to make some changes.
Felt like you wanted something more.
Yeah. And this like meditation, yoga was always in the background, and it was like a part of my life. It kept me going. And I didn't realize that I could like bring it into like what I actually like help the world with, I guess, which isn't, I don't teach yoga, but
Yeah.
helping other people be more mindful.
Mm. Well, that's actually interesting. A perfect question, because, or segue into the next question I have for you, because one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this, is I've been thinking a lot about this idea of leadership and what does it mean to be a leader, right? As we talk about leadership and mental health, in my mind, I'm like, there's so much area where I feel like my definitions of that might be different than most people's, but it makes me wonder what does it mean to be a leader to you?
Yeah. That's a, okay. What is leadership? Great question. So I've kind of like, I don't know, a lot of people have always said to me, you're a born leader, you have that natural leadership quality. I was always like the captain of my baseball teams and my football teams through high school and college. And so I think from like looking back at that, what it meant then was leading by example. I mean, I know that's like a phrase that is very widely used. So, but what that meant for me were like live my values and stay aligned with that. So I think leadership to me was showing up as best as I could in an honest and real way. And that was kind of in my like younger life, right? Like I would show up to the field and I'd work hard and I'd make sure that I was like nice to the other guys and lifting them up and being on time and doing all the things that I would expect other people to do.
Mm.
But now leadership to me is very similar. It's leading by example, but the example looks a little different. It's, I don't have to like, I think sometimes leadership, you feel like you have to be something else that you're not. And I think really what leadership is truly being yourself,
Mm.
and whatever that is. And everybody's leadership is going to look different. So that's really something that
Yeah.
is a lot easier said than done.
Super powerful, right? Totally. So much easier said than done. And I think that comes back to, like you said, is like there's this, it sometimes feels like for people in leadership roles, whether that's your parent, a coach, an entrepreneur, whatever it means, like whatever that role is, I think sometimes there can feel like you said, like feel like there's this outside pressure to that it has to look a certain way, like to be something that you're not. And like what an amazing consideration. Like what if leadership just means showing up as who you truly are and like having the courage to lead by example with that
Yeah.
like true authenticity and vulnerability.
Yeah. If what we're talking about is true, and being a leader is real freaking hard because
Yeah,
it's
because
not
someone
easy.
asked me like, they're like, Robin, you're doing this podcast series for, for leaders and entrepreneurs talking about mental health. Like, what does that mean? Are we talking about CEOs? Are we talking about, and I'm like, that's what's so fun about this is I'm like, what if being a leader is something so much different than just a title? Like,
Yeah.
can you be a leader without having a following?
Yes, because I think someone's always watching, and there's someone always
Right.
like learning from you. And so what's kind of what I'm thinking about right now is like when we think of good leaders in the world
Hmm.
and then we go and compare ourselves to other people, I think getting into some kind of comparison mode, especially for me, like becoming an entrepreneur, like seeing how other people are doing it is
Right.
like, oh, I need to be, what's an example? Like their Instagram reels are awesome and look how nicely like edited they are and they're speaking so
Yes.
eloquently and their audience must really understand what they're doing. I need to be more like that person. I think a big thing, especially for me with being a leader, and I don't know if this is a smooth segue or not,
Yeah.
but is having it all together. Feeling like you need to have it all together. And that was like
Totally.
a big part of my leadership. First, like first as a dad and a husband and starting this entrepreneurship journey, there's a big sense of or like this release of control, right?
Mm.
When you leave a job that has a salary to do your own thing, there's this, it feels like nothing's right. Like everything is scattered and all over the place. At least it did for me.
Yeah.
And um before I took this like entrepreneurship role, I really felt like I had it all together most of my life. I mean,
Interesting.
yeah, I
Totally.
think I had a lot of confidence growing up. Like, yes, I was overweight and I had some like mental drama around that and mental drama around like I wasn't smart enough, but overall I was pretty confident. And even like at my corporate job for 15 years, like comfortable in my own skin, moving and grooving. And then leaving that world into like, the hero's journey, stepping into the
Yeah.
unknown to go after your dreams, started to feel like everything fell apart. And
Yeah.
that was so that was for me. Why is this part of leadership? Because I thought for the first couple years of the entrepreneurship journey is that you had to have it all together, that like you have
Totally.
to have it all figured
Totally.
out. And I would try to like exude that to people I've talked to. They'd ask about the business and I would like try to tell them like, "Oh yeah, it's going well. This is working and that's working." And inside, I was like, they have no idea. Like I
Yeah.
am hurting so much. I'm so struggling. Those beliefs of I'm not smart enough, I'm not there's no way I can do this. I suck at school, I suck at learning, like all in my head all the time. And that was like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what that exactly has to do with leadership, but that's where I just got
Totally.
to.
Well, it's what creates that question for me. Like, what is it? Because as we talk about mental health, and we can talk about this in a second too. Like, what does mental health really mean, right? Like that, because it's like I think for me, what I started to notice is these questions like, what does it mean to be a leader? And I think that's such an important question because I think so many people create this mental construct where being a leader means you're a CEO or you're a manager or you've got 10,000 followers or 100 or whatever it is, or however many followers, or you're making 100K or a million, or, it's like there's this certain persona of like power and influence that I think we associate with leadership, which I think is interesting because what if power
Mm.
and influence is totally different than leadership? What if they're sometimes associated but not the same?
Power and influence equals leadership. Yeah.
And what if
I oh,
yeah,
go on.
what if power and influence is associated with powerful leaders because like my question, what I'm wondering is what if it's the other way around? What if the leadership comes first and as you show up in the world as a powerful leader, willing to, like you said, just live your from that authentic place, that vulnerability and that truth, because like you said, someone's always watching. And as you own that leadership, what if that's where the power and influence oftentimes can come from? Not to say that it can't come from a manipulation. There are a lot of people who are really good at just copy or marketing or strategy, right? And they can do that. But when we look at the leaders, the powerful leaders, I think that truly move us in inspiring ways, when we think about Martin Luther King or, any of these leaders throughout history that really left a mark in the world. What if that power and influence and that following was just a byproduct of them being a heart-centered human willing to share their story?
Yeah. I yeah, I think it's probably true that um yeah, I don't know. I think like a good leader, I'm reminded of this quote, and I'm not going to quote it right, and I don't know who it's from, but it's like of a good leader, at the end they'll say that we did it our own way, or like we did it by ourselves, or something like that. It's like that selfless leader that isn't looking for recognition and isn't really looking for influence. They're just empowering the people around them. And
Mm.
so yeah, I don't think um what are the words, what were the words you were using for that?
Well, like,
Influence
yeah,
and
influence, like in power and influence, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, I
uh,
just yeah, I don't I think you're 100% right. Like I would look and compare these other people that had influence and more money and things like that, and think that like, oh, they're the leader in my industry, I need to be like them. But those attributes don't have anything to do with leadership. And like you're saying, maybe it's the byproduct of
right.
leadership, I think is exactly what you're saying. So yeah, that could be true. I don't think they're qualities of leaders.
What would you say have been the most significant mental health or mental or emotional health challenges that you kind of experienced along that journey?
I think the biggest ones that I have experienced are, well, really what I was alluding to earlier, that like I need to have it all together. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a mental construct and a belief that I think a lot of us, a lot of the dudes I have, a lot of the dudes that I work with have that. Like I need to be the one that figures it out. Like if there's an issue to solve, I have to be the one to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that um like releasing of control almost. And so here's the mental, like when we're talking mental health, we're talking, I always like to think of it as mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
And the emotional part of that, when you think that like, when I'm thinking I need to have it all together, and then everything in the world is telling me it's not together. And by
Mm.
that, I mean like, risking some like the financial security of big corporate salaries and big corporate benefits. Like, okay, I don't have those anymore. That feels really out of control. And the out of control of like when you're running your own business, you're making the priorities, you're setting like what the expectations are, and you don't freaking know if they're right or wrong. And
Mhm.
so you're like, am I even working on the right stuff? So
Yeah.
telling myself like I need to have it all together and I don't. Yes, it's in our head, it's mental, it's those beliefs, but it also feels in our body like really scary, and it feels, so I think this was the biggest struggle that I went through, was like that scared something's not right. And then it goes into I'm not doing it right. And I need to be doing more. And it's this mix of like I was putting pressure on myself and I was beating myself up and I was trying to do it like all by myself and figure it all out. And that it felt really isolated. I mean, I was lucky enough to be going through it with my wife because we were running the business together. And, as her husband, there was also times where I wanted to feel like I had it together. Like I wanted her to know, like, don't worry, it's okay. She would say something about how, how are our consults doing per week? And I was like, we're good. And inside
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't know, this sucks. There's not enough consults coming in, whatever it was. And, um, so that was like, I guess that kind of leans into like the biggest struggle I had
Mhm.
on this entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah, so you said scared, feeling scared. And then the other thing you said was isolated, which is interesting, right? Like I feel like for me, that was one of the conversations that has come up a lot as we've been building this podcast series and this summit event that we're getting ready to talk about. Like, what are these major emotions that so many of us are feeling and oftentimes experiencing? And I think the isolation and the loneliness has been a really powerful one. That's been a big one for me too. And isn't it interesting that as we're doing this work with humans, that we can oftentimes feel so isolated?
Yeah. And, you could be surrounded by a bunch of people physically, but feel emotionally isolated and lonely and empty. And a lot of like now that I like the work that I'm doing right now is so cool. And sometimes I have to remind myself of this. Like when I'm talking to guys, sometimes this is the first time they're saying these things out loud to people that like, I'm not doing enough. I feel like I can't be who I need to be. I'm angry all the time and I have these thoughts of resentment, and you just like hold it in, and then you start thinking that you're the only one. You think that like you're the only one with these problems and there's something like wrong with you, and then you really don't want to share, and then you feel even more isolated and individualized. And as with my like coach hat on, throwing out that like, hey, you are normal. Like you're 100% normal. So many other people have these kinds of thoughts. Maybe share a story about me, share a story about another dude that I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
That it changes that feeling of isolation and that feeling of being alone. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
he hears me, he sees me. Like it feels different.
Yeah. Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, I want to invite you to come join us on May 19th through the 21st for the Shadowside Leadership Summit. It's going to be an entire weekend where we're going to dive into these conversations around identity and leadership, around mental and emotional health, around how to support ourselves so that we can truly lead others in a more impactful way, that we also get to experience connection and joy along the journey. ShadowsideLeadershipSummit.com. Go sign up and we'll see you inside. As you step into that leadership role and you start experiencing potentially even new levels of success, does that feel kind of on point for you? Like all of a sudden in this new role, in this new experience of the world, now I'm feeling new levels of isolation or fear.
Yeah, so I don't always think of them as new levels.
Okay.
I think that they're just like these old patterns that we have, and they just keep showing up every time you go to try something new and something scary. So
Yeah.
the yeah.
I
So it's
love that.
interesting. You're like, you feel that fear first, right? All right, I'm going to go try something new. This feels scary. Then that old belief comes up and is like, you got to have it all together. You shouldn't do this. You're not smart enough to do this. And
Yeah.
that piles it on. And it's so I've done it enough now in the last year. And actually, I think I practiced before. Like my wife and I have quit our corporate jobs, and that was scary. And we traveled around for a while. We've moved a bunch. We moved from Colorado to Ohio, and that was scary in a lot of ways, even though it's been an awesome move and we're closer to family. But now, when it's time to level up, it's like, oh yeah, there's that fear. Like I pretty much walk around being scared 90% of the time. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm 90% of the time scared. And I've learned to like carry it along with me. That like tightness in my chest, it doesn't cripple me. I don't start shaming myself because it's there. It's like, oh yeah, of course you're there. You're
Yeah.
worried. You think
Yeah.
this is going to happen, but you've been through it before, man, and you
You just
survive.
kind of normalize it, breathe through it. It's a part of the human experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It,
sometimes it takes a little longer, right? Like you gotta give yourself space to like journal or talk to somebody
yeah.
about it, or take long walks or take a nap and be easy on yourself.
Yeah.
um and like, yeah, so I don't know, I think that's been that I think that these old stories are very tenacious.
Yeah.
They need their attention. If we don't give them their attention, they take us over. And if
Yeah.
we just like learn to live with them and bring them along, it's where, like you said, like mental health, like it's not when things are going bad, it's when things are just going. It's life. It's like brushing your teeth. Like you always have to be aware of what's going on in your head. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I love that. Like that's one of the biggest things for me. I think and that was one of the questions I had earlier on that I think you touched on, even though I didn't specifically ask it, but like, what do you wish mental health meant to the world? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the lie that we really need to expose around this topic of mental health and the way we approach it?
Yeah, I think that it's not a problem, right? That there's talking about our struggles, talking about our emotions has nothing to do with weakness. It's like one of my coaches, Dan Doty, told this dream he has of like 30 years from now, his two sons are sitting around talking, and they're talking about their struggles in life and they're figuring it out. And they're like, do you know that 30 years ago, people didn't even talk about their struggles?
Mm,
Like, and
yeah,
that in 30 years from now, his dream is that like that's gone, that people just talk about what's going on mentally, talk about their um their fears, their dreams, their everything, and
yeah,
that we connect with each other on that level. Because right now, I think the lie is that if you have negative thoughts or negative emotions, then there's something wrong. And
right. And it's something to fix. And I
yeah.
think that's a beautiful segue, Tommy, into this idea, because as we started, one of the things that we talked about with this idea of the shadow side, right? We're talking about doing this shadow side leadership summit for people to come in and do this grand finale event at the end. And that's one of the things that has been coming up for me over and over again is kind of we talk a lot about the 50-50, right? At the life coach school and there's 50-50, right? The day and the night, the joy and the pain, like there's both sides of that human experience. And so as we talk about like the isolation, feelings of loneliness or feeling afraid, feeling fear, like all these quote unquote negative emotions that so many people want to avoid, I love what you said about like it's what if it's not a problem and it's just part of being a human and we can just not only normalize that but potentially even celebrate it. Because for me, what I've noticed in my journey is those hardest days, those most tenacious voices, those things, those shadows, if you will, that I have had to encounter over and over again, unworthiness, depression, anxiety, fear, like they have been my guides
Yeah.
in so many ways, right?
Yep.
And sorrow is like just the other side of the coin when we talk about joy, right? And so I'm curious, like when we talk about these experiences, how did going through those experiences of fear and isolation that you talked about, feeling like you need to have it all together, all the pressure, how did those experiences really contribute to the growth and success that you have since created?
Well, I think it becomes some like once you have the capacity to feel some of these emotions and be okay with them, you can allow other people to have those emotions in your presence, and you can hold space for them. Because I think that like the shadow work, like a lot of the times it happens in parenting. And I don't know if you have kids, but
Mhm.
no. Okay. So, but it happens with other people. We see something in someone else,
Yeah.
and it's a trait we don't like about ourselves, and we get triggered. So like I work with a lot of dads, and the dad will be like, oh, I see so much of my son in the like he doesn't have the best attention span. I see so much of myself in my son.
Hmm.
Like, oh, okay, somewhere inside there's a shadow that's telling him he doesn't have good enough attention. He
Yeah.
doesn't like
And
he
that it's
isn't
a
able to
problem.
focus the way he's supposed to be, and that it's a problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so for that shadow self, like if you don't look at it and like open up to it and
Yeah.
acknowledge that it's not a problem, it's just there, and it's
Right.
because I've been thinking this for a long time. If you still fight it, then when your son or your colleague or your client shows up with that same kind of belief,
Yeah.
you don't have the capacity to like say they're okay. You start thinking that there's something wrong with your kid, there's something wrong with your client that you have to fix. And it's so I think that's where like the shadow self can really be called out. It's like when
Mhm.
you notice you're like judging someone else
Yeah.
or thinking that they're in sorrow or they're hurting, it's like, wait a
Yeah.
second. How, like, where is that shadow inside of me?
Yeah, and it's
I don't
like
know.
and again, I think that circles back to noticing again like that shadow side that we all have and that like what if it's not a problem? Because the only reason when we see that in like you said in your kids or in other people, it's like the only reason creates a problem in the relationship if it's a is if I see it as a problem in myself.
Yeah. And okay. So where has the power been? Like you were asking for myself. So one is work. I'm able to be a better like coach for my clients. I think I'm able to be a better father because I can let my daughter have her own emotions. It's been a big one with my mom. Um, I have to have it all together throughout this process has brought up a lot of mental drama around my mom, and she's like amazing. Me and her have an awesome relationship. We've always have, but this I have to have it all together. I really felt around my mom. I couldn't tell her I
Mhm.
have problems. I couldn't like tell her something was messed up in my life. And so doing this work with our business, noticing these issues I had with my mom and my mental stuff, um, working through it has brought my mom and I a lot closer together.
Mm.
I don't think like we don't have like we have an amazing relationship. It's just a lot different than what it used to be, which is
Yeah.
supposed to happen, right? I'm not supposed to
Yeah.
have the same relationship as I had with my mom when I was 8 years old when I'm 40.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, like a lot of those beliefs are like still there. That like we try to be this old shadow self, and um, but that's just something else that came up when you said how
Yeah.
is it transformed, right? Everything bleeds over to
Yeah.
different areas in our life. We strive better in business, and we figure some of our mental stuff out, and we get to improve in business. But then it helps me with my relationship with my mom, and that's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Do you feel like these shadow sides of yourself that you've kind of noticed as you've gone through this entrepreneurial journey, do you feel like it has created more growth or success for you? Like when you look at, you've talked about like your relationship with your mom and also your business. Do you feel like there's one that came first or that has benefited more from having to go through that journey? Or do you feel like it's pretty equal?
Um, like if business has
Yeah,
been
when
more
you think
successful
about,
because of it or
yeah.
personal relationships.
Hmm.
Um, I can't really think of one more than the other. What's coming up for me is what's coming up for me is like none of this work needs to happen,
Mm.
right? Like all of this stuff I'm talking about, I don't need to dive this deep into like
Yeah.
performing at my ultimate best and getting like shining a light on these shadow things because it can be really uncomfortable. And it's so I like for the listeners out there, you don't
Yeah.
need to do this work. Like you're gonna be fine. If
Yeah.
you are lonely and isolated, it doesn't mean that you have to go start working on the relationship you had with your mom. It just
Mhm.
means that like you're not alone. Talk to
Yes.
somebody, and like that will be enough.
I
So I
love that.
do like to say that because no one, yeah, I like to say no one needs to do this work. If you want to do this work, it's there for you. And I think for me, yeah, it's like all areas of my life. Business has like I guess you can see a correlation
Yeah.
when you're on top of your mental health and when I'm not on top of my mental health of like my relationships and the people around me and my business and like what's coming in and out and the quality of work I'm putting out. Like if I'm not managing my mental health, then
Yeah.
yeah, things can fall flat.
Yeah, I love that idea of choice, right? Like it's just a choice and that there's no right or wrong that we get to create our own experience. But yeah, like that where we are whatever the mental or emotional experience that we're having is, right? Because mental health, it's not just about the dark side, there's the light side too, right? Mental health is also about joy and connection and intimacy. But the fact that you might be experiencing depression or isolation or loneliness or anger, like that doesn't mean that something's gone wrong. Doesn't mean that you're
Yep.
doing it wrong. And I love the idea of considering, like, what if these shadow sides, like you said, right? What if they are in fact the gateway to our greatest contribution? Like, what if they are literally bringing us home to ourselves? And what if that is the pieces of the puzzle that are creating your specific leadership style and how you show up with your clients and the way that you guide them?
Yeah, I think it is like back to these like I kind of think that we've built these layers since we were a little kid. And this isn't just my idea, but like we come into this world pretty like free and open and receiving
Yeah.
and loving and our pure self. And I like the picture of as we move through life, we learn how to survive and we pile on these personalities and these personas, and what these early ones become our shadow self, kind of like we're talking about. And when we do start to shine the light on them and get to know them a little bit, I think all we're doing is like, actually one of my meditation teachers um, talks about deconstructing yourself
Mm-hmm.
and breaking, like seeing these shadow parts, peeling them away a little bit. I think the big thing is it opens you up to love, opens you up to like have your heart shown instead of protect it.
Yeah.
And like I think good leaders lead from the heart. Like when you can lead with faith and trust that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to, and you don't have to protect or block or be something that you're really not, that's when you like make magic in the world.
I love that so much. What a beautiful segue into our end. The last question I'm going to have for you before we end, Tommy, is what was your moment of greatest joy along this journey?
Oh, I saw that question before I came, and I couldn't, I was like, I can't, it brought me back to like every day I feel fear and every day I feel joy.
Mm,
um the I think the greatest joy, one of them has been loving my work and being able to show my daughter that work is like good. It's not something I
mhm.
grumble about. um And she even said, like a couple weeks ago, she's like, and daddy, you help people. And I don't
Mhm.
consider myself like help people. People help themselves. Like they know what to do best. But her just saying that, I was like, all right, I must be doing something right if that's what she thinks. So that,
Mhm.
when you asked that question before, that's what came up to me. But I mean,
Yeah.
sitting on this call, getting to have this conversation with you, I've
Yeah.
felt nervous throughout it. I've
Yeah.
felt scared, and I've like had huge smiles of like joy on my face. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
amazing. And how can people find more about you, Tommy?
The website, easiest way,
Okay.
tommygcoaching.com. Check it out. The Durable Dad podcast is on there, releasing episodes every week, and you can learn more about me, reach out, have a conversation. I mean, you can always find me.
I love it. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for spending this hour with us today. I'm so
no
grateful for
way.
you. Thank you.
Robin, right back at you. Thanks for everything you're doing with this.
If you enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot of it for me and share it on your favorite social media platform so that your friends can find out about it too. And in the meantime, I just want to invite you to remember that you are beautiful, that you are worthy, that you belong, and that you are powerful beyond measure. See you next time.